I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this is Outside My Window. Our guest in this episode certainly needs no introduction, Reverend A.D. Bill Newell. Reverend Newell, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you most kindly.
Reverend Newell, you grew up in Clark's Harbor,
Yes, sir.
a well-known fishing community.
Right in the middle of the city.
Yeah, right. We're right in the middle of town, were you?
Yes.
So, 1945
Yes.
is the last year of the Second World War. What are your earliest memories? What was it like growing up in Clark's Harbor during that time?
Well, we were, as I say, we were in the middle of town, and it was a lot of fun looking back. We made our own fun as kids. We first played with kids in the neighborhood, and then expanded a little bit as it got into school and whatnot. And well, we spent a lot of time roaming through the woods, a bunch of us, and playing baseball. You went around and saw what everyone was doing, and then got them all together, and you chose sides, and you had a baseball, and you beat the cover off it, and then you put black electrical tape on it, and kept on going. But we made our own fun. There were no organized sports per se at that time for us.
Now, did your parents allow you and your friends to go down and play amongst the boats and the wharves, or was that kind of off?
No, we were down around the wharves, around the shore. My father ran a service station, which was a hangout for the fishermen. On a windy day, you'd get 30 or 40 fishermen there, all trying to talk at the same time. So it got a little noisy and a little smoky, but the rule was, my dad would say to people, if you see him over the wharf acting up, take a lath to him. Now today you'd be arrested for assault, but back then that was the rule. And you knew that if you did act up, in all likelihood it was going to get back home, then you were really in trouble.
What was it like going to school?
We had one of the old style schools, 4 classrooms downstairs, 4 upstairs, and you worked your way around downstairs, and then you moved upstairs. And it was interesting. Again, you made a lot of your own activities. We didn't have a gymnasium per se. There was a hall that they used to play basketball in, but other than that, it was outdoors, and you played marbles, and you ran around, and again, things were held. The rules were pretty strict, and you didn't talk back. And my mother's rule was, if you get in trouble in school, don't come home and brag about it, because you're in double trouble. And you knew that was the rule too. And then my mother became a teacher. She had been a teacher, permissive teacher earlier. After she went through grade 11, she taught school, and then she went back when there were shortages of teachers. Matter of fact, I had her one year when my teacher went off in grade 6 on a pregnancy leave. And that was interesting.
Were you a teacher's pet?
No, my mother was not partial. If it went anything, it went the other way. Yeah, it was more. Things were more reinforced, harder with me. Matter of fact, I won. They used to give at graduation, the highest average got a silver dollar, and it wasn't announced in grade 6. Because I had the highest average, and my mother didn't want it to be said that. Because the old teacher made up the exams and corrected the exams. My mother just watched over us taking them, but she no way was it going to get out that her son got it because she was the teacher. That wasn't going to take place.
No such thing as a snow day back in those days either, was there?
Actually, if there was a snow day, I remember one year we had 3 snow days, and we had to make them all up on Saturdays.
Wow.
1 o'clock.
I wouldn't go over well today, would
A 1 o'clock session.
Oh my!
Well, you got to sleep in anyway.
You had to go to 1 o'clock.
Oh, you had to go until 1 o'clock.
Oh.
I got you.
Yeah, you had a recess, and you took a little something to eat for lunch to tide you over, but you went to 1 o'clock to make up that day. So, but I think you could only make up 3, but that was all we had, so we didn't really get a snow day. No.
As you as you got older, into your teenage years,
Yes.
I mean, did they have dances or?
We had dances, girls on one side of the room, boys on the other. Very seldom did the two meet, but once in a while.
I think that was typical all the way around.
When the girls got bold enough to come and ask you to dance, it was, usually the girls took the initiative. And then when we got to grade 10, we went off to Barrington to school. They moved the elementary, well, they went grade 7 up, moved at the same, we all moved at the same time. And then they maintained the elementary grades at Clark's Harbor. We went up by bus back and forth to Barrington.
That must have been an adventure in those days too.
It was. At that point, I began to see the world, because in grade 10, I was sent to an Allied Youth Conference in Buck Hill Falls, Pennsylvania. That was the first time I'd been past Liverpool or Digby.
Wow.
So that was quite an adventure. And then I went to Prince Edward Island for the Red Cross Youth Training program, and that was like a 10-day thing. That was quite an adventure. Went by train and whatnot, so that was quite an up and coming thing. And the next year, I think I went to Bridgeport, Connecticut as an youth exchange to another Red Cross conference. So I started my involvement with the Red Cross at that point. Went through, became part of the post-high Red Cross youth, and then when I came here, I became regional vice president. Ended up as the provincial president for 2 years back in the late 80s, early 90s.
At what age did you decide you wanted to get into pastoral care and get into the ministry?
Ministry, I had finished high school. It had been in the back of my mind, probably somewhere, growing up different times, and I just, no way. But anyway, when I got into high school, and then I went into the bank, Royal Bank. I worked there for a year in Lunenburg, and I was miserable till halfway through when I sort of gave in to what I call a calling to ministry, and that was when that would have been in 1964, 65. 65, actually, 65, yes.
How much of an influence did your upbringing, did your parents and family have on that decision and ultimately that calling?
I'm sure. Well, my grandparent, I didn't know my maternal grandmother, but my paternal grandmother was a very devout Christian lady, and I'm sure she prayed a lot for me. My grandfather was very much involved, and then my mother was the Sunday school superintendent, and the rule of the house was, as long as you're in my house, you'll go to Sunday school, and we did. And again, we knew better than to try to argue with my mother. Didn't work. Did not work.
So at what point did you, get involved with the veterans and the military in general?
Probably back, actually, when I was in my teens, I was in Boy Scouts, and we had our meetings in the Legion Hall. So we were sort of, but I can remember even a younger child going to Remembrance Day services at the Cenotaph, and always very much impressed with the sacrifice of those who had been in the service, and what they had the toll it taken on them physically and mentally. In my early teens, I used to sell poppies for Remembrance Day to help for the funds for the veterans. Our Boy Scout scout leader was an American Air Force sergeant, so he taught us how to march because they wanted the Boy Scouts in Remembrance Day parade, and if we were going to be in the parade, we were going to march properly. And we practiced marching around the Legion Hall quite regularly. And then when I came here to Yarmouth in 1973, it carried on my interest in, I was involved different times, invited to take part in the services at the Cenotaph, and as we were mentioning at the beginning, I can remember being there I remember one day in particular where we had a sleet storm and the snow landing on my head, wet, cold snow, and then dripping down my back. It took me till the middle of the afternoon to get warm that day. But I just grew into it, I guess, and again, based on my appreciation for the freedom we had, I said I use quite often. I'm currently the chaplain for the Legion and for Vets Place, and I do a memorial service for a lot of our vets. When one dies, we have a service to honor them. And I've said, read from Psalm 16, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. And part of that is the sacrifice of our veterans to give us the freedom that we have and be able to live in the country that we live in. I've said a couple of years ago, I did a Remembrance Day service in church, and I said, what did you ever do to earn the right to be born in this land? It's a gift. It's nothing. It's not a right. It's a gift that has been given to us, and to whom much is given, much is required in turn, in response.
So what brought you to Yarmouth?
When I finished seminary, you get contacted by churches who are looking for a pastor, and I heard that this church, the church where I was looking for a pastor, and I met with the committee, and they gave me a call, and I came and preached in February of 1973, and came here in August the 1st in 1973, thinking at that time, while our son was 6 weeks old, thinking at that time if I lasted, 2 years, which was, because the average stay amongst our Baptist pastors at that time was a year and a half. And I knew that some had been in their churches for 25 or 30 years. So being a first church, they sort of said you should try to stick it out for 2 years and learn a bit. And I ended up being here, and I'm in my 49th year in Yarmouth. So.
You shattered the average there. I think you've
just
set the bar.
slightly. It might not be a record, but it is a fair average.
I think you've set the bar quite high. And so as you settled in on your pastoral duties, at what point did you start to branch out and become involved with, say, the fire services, their chaplain, and all the other activities that we all know you for?
I joined the fire department in 1976, just a month after the groundhog storm. And I had gone down to hang out around at the fire hall because we lived in a house that had hot water heat and electric stove. So we didn't have any heat or water. We had 2 children, one not quite a year old. And I can still picture my wife wrapped up in a blanket that morning, feeding the baby a bottle of cold milk, saying, now where are we going to go? And we knew her mother and stepdad lived in a place where they had a fireplace, so we knew at least there would be some heat. One of our parishioners sent her daughter over to get us to come there, and they had 5 kids, so they were in 2 rooms with a space heater. So Betty suggested I go, that'd be Paul Cleveland's wife, suggested I go down to the fire hall, so I went down and hung out, and ended up getting invited to join the fire department. And that was in March of 1976. And I thought, well, I can join, but I'll never be there for 12 years to become a vet. And now I've been in the fire department for 46 years.
It seems like a trend for you to just keep on hanging around.
Yeah, I can remember when I became officially RCMP chaplain in June of 1998. I had been working with the RCMP on different cases, notification of families and this type of thing over the years. And then they set up a formal chapel program. And our coordinator at the time said, the way you get involved is you loiter with intent. You go and hang out and just, because, and then that's the way people get to know you a bit.
Reverend Newell, the life of a minister, of a pastor, is not an easy one. It's not a 9-to-5 job. What is it like to?
It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're on call all the time. Even a day off is not really a day off, although thankfully I think the new pastors have learned that they've got to learn from the mistakes of some of us older fellows, because if you don't take time, you just can't function as you should. And, it catches up with you after a while.
I'm sure it must.
And I've been involved. I was right from the get-go. I enjoyed working in the hospital, and I used to be and still am sometimes, get called in the middle of the night. I can remember Dr. Parkash, after meeting him there 2 or 3 nights, in the middle of the night, because of family need, whatnot, him looking at me and saying, "I thought I was the only one crazy enough to work these hours." So
During those difficult years, those hard years, and as you mentioned, you have to comfort those who are dying, the families. Was there ever a time, Reverend Newell, that you thought, what have I got myself into? And did you ever question your faith during those challenging times?
Can't say that I questioned my faith. I questioned what I was doing a few times, but when I first felt called into the ministry, one thing my pastor at the time gave me a little brochure that said, "Make sure if you're calling, that you're doing it because you believe that God wants you to do it, because there will be times when you will question what you're doing and why you're doing it, and if you aren't really committed to the calling, you could probably pack it in quite easily." So yeah, there were times, definitely times that things just got piled up, but somehow or other, the good Lord got us through it, and we managed quite well.
Are there younger people getting in the ministry now, or?
There are. Again, our current pastor who succeeded me, his son, matter of fact, is studying it for ministry. A lot of people sometimes do it, they fight it for years and then sort of semi-retire and then go into ministry as a second career. And so, yeah, there are people, not as many as there probably was at one time, and I'm not sure that everyone, and I don't want to make any pretense that I'm their judge, but I'm not. It's not my job. Someone's a lot higher and smarter than me is responsible for that one. But it becomes a real challenge, and again, you've got to make sure you know what you're doing it not because you get impressed by it, but because you think God wants you to do it and you can't do anything else.
But it's also, it's not a job, it's not a career, it's
a
a
calling.
lifestyle.
It's a calling.
Yeah.
And I've had people ask me that, how can you? I said, look, if you're not called into it, you won't do it.
How does one know when they get a calling?
You just get, it's an inner feeling, and I know I fought it till I couldn't fight it anymore. It just became overwhelming, and you said, here I am, send me, and that's it's God has a way of getting through to you if you're listening.
And I think that's part of it is, are you listening?
Are you listening? Yep. Are you listening?
How did you and your wife meet?
We were in high school together. She didn't like me.
See, I know these are always the most interesting stories to ask people, right?
We were in and when we were in grade 11, I think it was grade 12, we had an Indian phys ed teacher from India, and he set up the school on a house system with, I think there were about 6 house teams for intramural sports, basketball, soccer, volleyball, badminton, and Thom and he put us together as co-captains of one of the houses, and it grew from there. And then she went into nursing, and I went into banking, and then I called halfway through that year. I called and told her that I felt called into the ministry, and we kept on, and here we are 53 years later.
Yeah, another longevity.
Yes.
As Quinn said, you're holding some records. I have to ask you, so what gave you the impression she didn't like you in school?
She told me.
Oh, this is getting good.
I guess people were a lot more honest out there in those days.
Yeah, she could.
I'm going to keep probing here. So what was it? I mean, you're such an affable, likable person.
Well, I think she just thought I was kind of struck on myself at that time. I don't know if I was or not. I never thought I ever was, but she had that impression.
So what was the turning point?
Well, as I say, we were with this inner house type of thing and working together, and grew closer and closer. And I guess I don't know just what the turning point was, but anyway.
You were just kind of hanging around, and she felt like she needed to keep you hanging around.
I think so. Yes.
Well, that's good. That's good.
I was in school for 3 years before we were married. 2 years in Moncton, and then I went down to Massachusetts, and she finished her nursing, then came to Yarmouth for a year to work to, quote, earn some money, and her dad wasn't well at that time, so she wanted to be, able to spend some time, with him, and thankfully she did. And then we were married in 1968 in August, and we moved to the States a couple of weeks after we were married for me to go back to school. She got a job in the hospital and earned her PhD, putting hubby through.
Wow.
And at the senior graduation banquet from seminary, she got a formal diploma signed by the president of the Divinity College and the dean, and it was duly presented to the other wives at the seniors banquet.
Nice.
Oh, very nice.
And our son was born a week before I graduated from college. No, he was 10 weeks old when we came. He was 6 weeks old when we moved back home, and then took July off, and then I started in the 1st of August.
And what career path did he choose?
He is a computer geek.
Okay.
He does computer security for Bell Alliant. I have no idea where he got it from, because I do not know technology.
What would I too, Reverend?
Technology is not my forte by any stretch of the imagination. I have good friends that I call on to bail me out.
And I totally understand. I mean, you know my father, and he was on the Blue Notes for many years, and schooling wasn't exactly, his forte as far as book learning goes.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I
Yeah.
much prefer hands-on.
Yeah.
So I'm the technology geek in the family. My older brother's a mechanic.
Yeah.
And my younger brother does a little bit of everything, and it's, it just kind of
Yep.
seems to fall into
Fall
place.
in place, right.
I know how you feel, Reverend, because if some kind of a device doesn't turn on when I press the button, I'm at a loss. And,
Yeah.
and if it wasn't for Quinn and his knowledge and abilities, this wouldn't be.
Yeah, I
you can
hear
see
you.
all the equipment we use here. I can't recall how many, but I think since the first broadcast we used to do at the Lighthouse during
Yes.
the opening day of
Yes.
Fishery, and you were always there doing the.
Yeah, they had me up real early last year.
Yeah,
'Cause I think they opened it like
that's right.
5
too.
o'clock.
Yeah, it was,
Yes.
it was a little earlier.
And we got putting off. I was down at the radio station, so well before breakfast. Let's put it that way.
You always spoke during those events when we chatted with you on air about the connection between between God and the sea, and obviously growing up. But can you speak to that? If you
Yes. Well, I've always been amazed. Well, that with the ocean, it's such a contrast. It can be stock calm one day, and the next day howling with a lot of waves and whatnot. And you wouldn't want to be out. I wouldn't want to be out on it, but I think sometimes it's in your blood. But I've always been amazed, of in the New Testament, Jesus was a carpenter, and yet when he called his disciples, at least 4 of them were fishermen. And Peter, Andrew, James, and John, and it always struck me how a landlubber could attract fishermen to be close followers, it was something about him and his personality, and that commanded respect and love and whatnot, and it's always amazed me. Oh, and there were some stories, parables and things he drew from the sea and whatnot that just are simply amazing, and amazed them, as well, because they just couldn't understand, how even the wind and the waves obeyed him. Wanted to quote Peter. They'd spent years with him, but still were astonished at some of the things that he did.
One of the other notable things you're known for in the community is the food bank.
Yes.
So that's probably another thing that you've been at for a long time.
Yes. Back 1986, 87. If you recall, I don't know how good your memory is. You're a little younger than I am, but we had a ship here, the Brant Point. But this was back in Allwood product days, and it came in, and the ship was arrested because the company hadn't paid their bills, and the crew hadn't been paid for 6 months. So when the ship was arrested, it was a piece of junk. You could see out through the sides of it in places. I don't know how they dared to travel from South America up here, but they brought lumber up from South America here for Allwood products, and then the sheriff arrested it, and they couldn't leave port. And there were 5 of the crew who refused to leave because they hadn't been paid for 6 months. 4 of them were Filipinos. The engineer was a Dutchman. And at that time, we had been talking in a group of pastors about the need for a food bank so that we could consolidate everything in one place, so that because at the time, some people were going from one end of town to the other and getting assistance from 4 or 5 churches, which meant when those resources were gone, there wasn't enough for anybody else. So we talked about a food bank. I said, well, right now I'm up to my elbows in looking after these men, because I went on the radio, and we raised money and whatnot, and kept them fed from September. We thought they'd be gone by Christmas, and they were here till February before the case was settled, and they flew home. At Christmas time, we had a bit of money, so I was going to give each of them $150 for things they needed to send home to their family or whatever. One of the Filipinos was married, and he gave the Filipino fellows all gave their portion of the money to him, and we were able to send $450 US to this family in the Philippines. This was the time of the rebellion of Ferdinand Marcos against him. His wife, had all the shoes. And
yes.
Those stories. Anyway, and it was a question of whether or not, but anyway, the money did get through. And I thought, well, the family hadn't had money for 6-8 months. What's $450? And then some of the news stories were saying the average income in the Philippines was $450 for a family a year.
Wow.
So we had given him, in effect, a year's money for his family. And I still have a letter somewhere in my files from the family expressing their appreciation. So after that, the next year, we started the food bank. So it was in the fall of '87 that I chaired the committee that set the thing up. And matter of fact, we're still using some of the stuff that we got from that first food bank back in 1987. We had the shelves that we use came out of the old home hardware store on Main Street from Jack.
Yes.
Jack said to me, "You need some stuff?" I said, "Yeah." Well, I got these shelves you can have. So we put them on a pipe and rolled them over. I painted them myself the first time, and we got set up. And again, we're thinking, 3 or 4 years and we'd be out of business. And here we are,
40.
going on to 40 years later, still going.
In those early years, food bank was first located just behind the former LG Trask building.
Yes, in the pink Nixon barrel down in the basement of the law firm there, and we stayed there for 30 plus years, and then the lawyers sold the building. Phil Starr was in that one too. They sold the building, and the people who bought it were not quite as nice as, we ended up with no heat in the basement. We had no heat per se, but we got the heat radiated off the pipes from the hot water system for upstairs. So we were, it was comfortable at least, but then it got damp and cold and whatnot, and then we moved to where we are on Herbert Street now.
Initially, in those early years, how did you acquire, because things have changed, I mean, there's food in Nova Scotia different, but back then, how did you get your food donations?
From the community. From the get-go, we've had excellent support, and people give us not only food and food drives, but they give us money, and when we're short of something, we order it and get it that way. And then now probably 30 or 40% of what we get comes from Feed Nova Scotia. We still get a lot of support locally, and I would say we're probably one of the most fortunate food banks in Nova Scotia because of the local support. Our people in Yarmouth County are second to none when it comes to helping out.
With a situation like that, I mean, you wouldn't be able to manage without volunteers.
Oh, it's all volunteers. None of us get paid. We probably take out of our pockets because if we use our vehicles and whatnot, but we have a core group of volunteers who are there every week, and then we have some who are there a couple weeks, couple Tuesdays a month, and then others once a month. But they're regulars. I mean, we've got probably 25 or 30 regular volunteers, and we could have more people would like to help, but there's no room. You can't have can't be tripping over one another. It's difficult we haven't got. I mean, we got probably more space to work with than we had, but we still don't have enough space. But that's neither here nor there. Because we have what we have, and the place we're at is much better than, because we have windows and air and it's cleaner and it's brighter and it's a whole light years ahead of where we were.
The atmosphere.
The atmosphere, definitely. The working conditions and the whole bit. Because it got to the point where in the winter with the cold and the damp, I mean, I've got volunteers in their 90s that are there on a very regular basis, and health-wise, it wasn't healthy to be there in the old building before we left. It got to that point.
Is the food bank set up modeled on a standard approach, or is it something that you've kind of crafted on your own?
Some of it we've crafted on our own, I think, pretty much. I'm sure there are other places that do a little bit differently, but what we have seems to be working. So if it ain't broke, we don't fix it.
Don't fix it. Absolutely, I totally agree. So again, jumping into one of the other things that you're known for a long time would be Remembrance Day services.
Yes.
At what point did you start becoming actively involved? I know that you attended them as a boy, and so did I. I volunteered for Viking Cable, and many a day we would be out there in inclement weather to do it. But At what point did you become actively involved, and then maybe speak a little bit about the evolution of the services to the Mariner Center?
Well, I think when I hadn't been here all that long when I got invited to take, they used to invite various pastors to take part, and then it evolved a little bit differently to follow the format that the National Command of the Legion had set out in their manual and whatnot. And always on the Remembrance Day, it seemed to be at least windy, if not rainy or snowy or whatnot. And then as our veterans aged, I was involved taking part, but then I was talking to some of the Legion members and said, look, I remember 1 or 2 years, we moved from the cenotaph to the drill hall at the armories, but you never knew. That call was never made till the morning of, which made it very confusing and difficult. And really, the drill hall was not the place to be because there were no seating. It was hard for to see the younger ones to see and this type of thing. So I said, look, we need to. Our veterans are getting older. If we want them there, we've got to have a place that they can be somewhat comfortable. You don't want to kill them because you're, having a service and honoring them, but not only them, but their comrades who went before them. So that's when the Mariner Center was built, then the Legion checked it out, and then I was still asked to take part. In the last few years, I've been asked to lead the service, and happy to do. I'm always happy to do what I can for our veterans. Again, as I expressed from the time I was young, I always had a deep appreciation for their sacrifice and their service, and this is my a small way of saying thank you. So, and I have had several awards over the years, but probably the one I cherish the most is the Friendship Award I got from National Command of the Legion for service to veterans, and I cherish that because it's something I'm glad to be able to do, and I conduct Legion services for our veterans through Branch 61 at the funeral homes. If they want a Legion service, I've been conducting that for the last few years. And again, it's a small way that I can say thank you to that particular veteran. They're getting scarce. I can remember the last World War ones here in Yarmouth, and now we're getting down to very few in Veterans Place now. We've only have about, I think, 5 or 6 veterans in the beds. The others are being used as an intern place for regular people because the beds are there and they want, to keep the facility going. And because there are regulations as to who can go, again, set up by the government, national government, as to who can go into they've got to be Second World War, Korean War veterans. Current veterans don't qualify. It doesn't make sense to me. I've grumbled about it to whoever will listen, but it doesn't, and it's something that the Legion is trying to work toward to make it open for peacekeeping veterans, the Afghan veterans, this type, but it hasn't come through yet.
That's unfortunate.
I think so, Gary. Very, very unfortunate. They do. I think they do provide support, but they will not do the full service. They'll pay for them into a nursing home. Whether that's less expensive, who knows? But there's a camaraderie in the veteran places because they know one another. They've been through similar experiences. They can share with one another and support one another. And I was when the Veterans Place was set up, I worked with a committee for the putting up the decorations pictures and things through the place. And again, you didn't want to honor war, but you wanted to pay tribute and respect to what they had gone through. So there's a mix there, but it was something. And again, I was asked to be the padre there, and so ever since it's been open, I've been taking part in that.
The face of the veterans in general is obviously changing. As you mentioned, you've witnessed the World War I vets pass on, and most of the World War II vets. And now we're into the peacekeeping and the Afghan and the more modern, quote unquote, veterans, as it were. So when Remembrance Day ceremonies come about, are they still as important as what they used to be?
I think they are, because again, you're paying tribute to all veterans. You're not honoring war, you're honoring the sacrifice of those who served to give us what we have, help give us what we have in this country today, to ward off tyranny and to bring about keeping peace going in many places. There's, as long as there are people, there's probably going to be wars. People have been fighting, I think, probably from the get-go. So I don't expect that to be eliminated. But I think we owe respect and tribute to them, and even though a lot of the focus is perhaps on the Second World War vets, the other veterans who take part in the service are honored as well, and rightly. I mean, we have had over the years a representative from the various services, including Korean vets, up on the platform during the year. Now, I expect probably eventually they're going to be honoring peacekeepers from various places.
How do you explain things to somebody that hasn't been there? How do you relate what the veterans would have gone through to somebody who really just doesn't have that frame of reference?
I think I'm quite interested. I've read a fair amount of war history and whatnot, and I remember I have 3 books that talk about basically the travel of the military through when they went back into Europe and through and into some of the battles that they fought with the guns. And one in particular book I remember, it was talking about the freeing of Holland and some of the battles, and some of the we've had soldiers here, and Doug Jackson was one who was involved in one of the battles that happened toward the end in Holland, in the liberation of Holland, and it was pretty. And I think Ray Zink interviewed Doug shortly before he died, yes. And I have a copy of that tape. But having read it about it and then hearing about someone who was actually there, and I think this is what the veterans try to do, is to go into the schools and to explain to the kids some of the things they went through and the struggles they went through. And I remember one particular story in this book was a fellow was a spotter for the artillery, but he was up in the top of a windmill, and the shelling was going on all around him, and he was giving, and the Germans couldn't quite figure out. They knew someone was doing it because they had to keep an eye on where they were, and because the artillery were able to zero in because he was up in this windmill and sending back reports as to where the Germans were, and it was quite a. And somehow I read read in the paper, I think it was after that, they were talking to this same guy that was there up in this tower. It was quite an interesting, phenomena.
I think, as a younger person myself, growing up and having been at a lot of the Remembrance Day ceremonies as a young boy in my early teens, I always felt that, you know, what little bit of inclement weather it
Yes.
was at the time was a much smaller sacrifice for
Yes,
me
absolutely.
than what some of the veterans had gone through.
Yeah,
I just can't imagine.
I read Pierre Burton's book on Vimy, and it was like in April, and it was miserable. There was the muck holes and the shell holes and things. Some of them you fell into if there's water, and you would end up drowning because they were. And I always, like you, at the time I've been outside the services and whatnot. It's a small price to pay compared to what they went through and what they paid.
Do you think technology today, because now of course we live stream
Everything.
the ceremonies, has brought a different level of attention to the services?
To a point, maybe, but I think it's good that we have the technology is there to be able to share that with people because again, some of our veterans are unable to get out now. I look over. One thing I always tend to notice is when the parade marches in, how many out of our Second World War, it becomes fewer and fewer and fewer every year. Just recently, I was honored to be at Vet's Place when they brought down a squad or some of a squadron from Greenwood to honor Jim McCrae, who will be 104 on November the 27th. Wow. And these people were. One of the pilots said, Jim, not everyone knows, but Jim has a Distinguished Flying Cross, which is about the highest medal you can get in the Air Force, right up next to the Victoria Cross. And he was shot down off Iceland during the Second World War. And he said, nowadays, he said, you see pictures of the Victoria Cross in books and in the museums, not pinned to someone's chest. And it was quite a interesting. Then they asked questions and from his memories and whatnot. I mean, his memory's getting a little foggy at times, but he was pretty sharp and pretty accurate that day. And it was I enjoyed just being there and listening.
How important is it to document people's stories? Because I mean, one thing that Gary and I talk about all the time is as people pass on.
Absolutely, that history goes with them. And that's why I thought going back to Gary's colleague Ray Zink, Ray used to do that, and I remember I appreciated so much because I had the honor of doing Doug Jackson's service for the Legion service plus his funeral service, but I so much history go with them that we and they really didn't talk about that much about their.
That was the other thing I was going to mention. I mean, I know that it must be uncomfortable for them.
Oh, some of them just have buried it away in their memories, and I can understand that. We're more involved with post-traumatic stress now, and I mean, during the First World War, some of them were shot because they were shell shocked, but they were looked upon as being cowards and this type of thing. And thankfully, we have learned a lot more, but unfortunately, for some of those, we never learned soon enough.
I remember sitting down with Jim McCrae in his living room just before his 99th birthday. Right. It's going to be 104. Yeah, that's an incredible story. Yes. And Quinn and I were talking about this earlier today. These men and women were so young.
Oh, well, it hit me. I think I was speaking at one of the Remembrance Day services when my son turned 18. And I thought, good grief. They were going overseas at my son's age. It just gave me a whole different perspective on it at that point. They were extreme. And I mean, some of them lied to get in early. 15, 16. Some of them got away with it, some of them got caught, sent back home. But they felt it was their duty, and unfortunately, I think some of them just thought there was a big adventure, not knowing the horrors of war. The media and things, coverage that we have now, it's instant. Casualty reports that come out in like in Afghanistan and this type of thing. If that had gone on during the Second World War, I'm not sure it would have continued nearly as long. But that's neither here nor there.
Reverend Newell, what is the underlying message that you give to folks each Remembrance Day during the service?
I try to, remind them that, again, we have a rich heritage, and these men and women who left home and family, as Quinn said, went through terrible conditions, a lot of deprivation. They went without a lot. The cold, the hunger, because the supply lines weren't that great, and they went through a lot for us. Because they felt it was their duty to protect the homeland. And again, going back to what I said from Psalm 16, the boundary lines have fallen for us. In pleasant places, surely we have a delightful inheritance, and it didn't come cheap.
What's retirement been like for you, Bill?
I tell people I'm semi-retired, then they don't laugh as loud because I'm still involved, of course, with the food bank. I have my Padre duties with the fire service, the RCMP, the Legion in Veterans Place, and some with the hospital. Not as much now. I've sort of eased out from that, but I still get calls sometime in the middle of the night. Not as much as I did, thankfully. I'm getting older and I need my sleep. It's not beauty sleep, it's just plain sleep. Beauty sleep went a long time ago. But but at the same time, I'm not complaining about it. I tell people I'm my mother's son. My mother at 86 was still going to the schoolyard every noon hour to supervise the playground. I think I caught some of her genes. So I've seemed to be, but serving is part of who I am and what I am, and as long as the good Lord gives me the strength, I'll continue to try to be of help to people. I think that's why I'm here.
Final words?
It's been a good life. I don't know where 49 years in Yarmouth have gone, but I'm in my 49th year now and serving here, and I've enjoyed the community and the people, and just being able to be part of things and part of people.
Well, Reverend Newell, we here in the Yarmouth area are glad you decided many years ago to come here. And on behalf of all of us, thank you, Bill, for everything you do for this community. It is much appreciated. And thanks for coming in to chat with us today.
Glad to be able to do it.
It's going to take 6 people, I think, to replicate all of the things that you do for the community.
Well, I've been privileged to share in the ups and downs in a lot of people's lives over the years, and hopefully I've been a bit of a help.
I'm Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this has been Outside My Window.